I want to start by telling you a story. It's a story about a little boy who, he's about 8 years old, and he lived out in the country with his folks. Sunday morning, church is done, and he's feeling pretty good about himself, so he asks his parents if he can walk home by himself from church. So these are dirt roads, and his parents think, yeah, it's probably going to be safe. So he's walking home from church, and as he's walking down the road from church, he sees a girl about his age coming toward him the opposite direction. They turn the same way, and now they're walking side by side down the road, and so the boy strikes up a conversation with her. And he says, "Hi." And she says, "Hi" back. He said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm walking home from church. What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm walking home from church." So he says, "Which church do you go to?" She said, "I go to the Catholic church." And he said, "Well, I go to the Lutheran church." So as they're walking down this dirt road, they get to a point where there was a great, big, huge mud puddle. It had rained the night before, and there was really no way around. They could go through the water and get wet, or they could walk around the edges and get muddy, and they don't know what to do. And the little girl says, "Man, if I get these clothes dirty, my mom's really going to be upset." And the little boy said, "Yeah, same for me." So finally the little girl said, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take off all of my clothes. I'm going to hold them on the top of my head, and I'm going to walk through that puddle." That's what little boy does. He looks her up and down once, and he says, "My goodness, I didn't realize there was such a big difference between Lutherans and Catholics." Thank you. You're just awake to get that. If you take the clothes off of our bodies, you see immediately that there are differences between males and females. If you take the clothes off of our brains, you'll also find differences. There are over 100 differences between a male brain and a female brain. If you take the clothes off of our souls, you also see the differences. Women are made in the image of God, female. Men are made in the image of God, male. We are created differently, but we are also created equally. And so what that means are that the issues that females face, the challenges that females face, are no more or no less important than those that men face. And yet the reality is that in the last several decades, the issues of our boys have been greatly undervalued. And our boys today are facing some incredible challenges. And so I want to spend my time with you today looking at some of the issues our boys are facing in the 21st century and talk about some things that we as men can do, whether we're dads or grandpas or uncles or just guys in the church, things that we can do to build in our boys who are becoming men bold, resilient faith. Now, this is personal for me. My wife and I have a son. He's 30, he'll be 37 years old. I have 3 grandsons, ages 8, 8, and 5. I also have a daughter. I have 2 granddaughters, and I know that what happens for men greatly impacts what happens to our women. And so this is personal for me. It's also personal for me because I'm a guy. And I know that nobody today is talking about how lost our boys are. And so I want to be a voice, and I hope you will be as well, a voice for our boys as we raise these boys to be good men. So for the last 60 years or so, our boys have essentially been sidelined from culture. And it hasn't always been intentional. Back in the 1960s, we recognized that our girls were behind boys in every area of education, and also they were behind boys and men in most areas of life. And so back in the 1960s and the early 70s, we collectively as a nation decided that we're going to fight for our daughters and we're going to get them caught up in school. In 1982, our girls caught up to boys, and then they soared past boys. And now in 2019, our boys have fallen behind girls dramatically in every area of education, from preschool through master's programs. But by 1982, the storyline that girls are behind and boys are ahead stuck. And even though boys are dramatically behind girls and have been for decades, that storyline that girls are still behind, that boys are ahead, is still the storyline in our culture. And so people continue to fight for our girls, and we need to continue to do that. But nobody's talking about the challenges that our boys are facing. And the result is what's happening is we are increasingly now raising boys who are undervalued, they are underskilled, and they are undermotivated, and they are increasingly unqualified for life in the 21st century. My friend Dr. Michael Gurian has been working on the issue of boys and girls for a long time, and he uses brain science research as his starting point. He just wrote a book called Saving Our Sons, and it looks like this, and we do have copies available for you today. This is research-based and brain science-based. But here's what he says in his introduction. He says, "In 30 years of working with children, I have never been more worried than I am right now for our sons. Some boys are doing very well, but millions are disappearing into violence, imprisonment, social withdrawal, listlessness, virtual worlds, and real-life self-destruction. If we don't end this national pattern, our boys and young men will become increasingly destructive, both to others and to themselves, because nearly every social problem we face in civilization today, unemployment, income inequality, incarceration rates, religious extremism, domestic abuse, mental illness, healthcare inequities, and painful violence against women, intersects in some way with the state of boyhood in America." Now, having said that boys have been ignored, basically, for the last 50 to 60 years, it is also true to say that in the last 7, 8 years, boys have become a hot topic again. In part because of the Me Too movement, in part because of all of these shootings that we see over and over again, often done by young men, people are asking the question today, what's wrong with our men? What's wrong with our boys? And the answers that they're coming up with, the ideologies that people are coming up with today to explain what's happening in our culture with masculinity are wrong, and I would suggest damning to our boys. Let me give you just a couple quick illustrations. Right after the Me Too movement came out, and I'll comment on that in a moment, there was this quote in USA Today. "Males learn a sense of superiority over females from the time they are children," writes Jennifer Berdahl. "Being a man means being superior to a woman and dominating women sexually or otherwise. Sexual harassment is taking that thinking to an extreme. Men are socialized from the age of 3 to think of themselves as being a real man, defined as dominating women." Now, first of all, let me just say, I am the father of a daughter. I have 2 granddaughters. I'm married. And I am passionate about what's been happening in the Me Too movement. I applaud these brave women who have come out of the shadow of their pain to call out these monsters. And let's not even call them men. They're monsters. They are not behaving like men at all. And we need this kind of movement to take on that kind of behavior. However, what often happens with movements is that there are some who move to the extremes, and what's happening in our culture is that we've looked at a few really bad men and we've labeled all masculinity with that broad stroke. And so what this professor is saying is that every boy from the age of 3, now think of that, every boy from the age of 3 is being socialized to dominate women. Now, if you think about that for just a moment, you realize that most boys in our culture are being raised by women in their early years. Most moms are doing most of the raising of our sons. 91% of elementary school teachers are female. Most of our Sunday school teachers are female. And so what she's really saying is that if boys really are from the age of 3 being socialized to dominate women, it's being done by women, and there's not a woman on the planet who's doing that. Every time I have moms raise their hands and say, "Are you socializing your sons to dominate women?" the hands go down. When I ask female educators, "Are you raising those boys in your classes to dominate women?" the hands go down. Are there bad men out there sexually abusing women? Yes. Are most men doing that? No. But our boys are being raised to believe that they're toxic. Here's another quote. "Patriarchy demands that all males, that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. If an individual is not successful in emotionally crippling himself, he can count on patriarchal men to enact rituals of power that will assault his self-esteem." Again, is this true for some guys? Yes. Is it true for the overwhelming majority of men and boys? No. But there's no nuance in the discussion right now. And so the pervasive storyline that our boys are growing up under is that because they're male, they're toxic. Because they're male, they are socially and emotionally stunted. Because they're male, they dominate women. And when boys grow up with that understanding of masculinity, they will do one of two things. They will check out and become the proverbial boy in a 35-year-old man body, sitting in the basement of his parents' home playing video games and watching porn, or he will become overly violent. And guys, that's not on our boys, that's on us, because of the lies that we're telling our boys as they're growing up today. The truth of the matter is that masculinity is a God-given gift. Masculinity is sacred. It's not toxic. Masculinity is rooted in the very character of God. God created us to be masculine. The world needs masculine energy. The world needs good men. And the way that good men are built are through men like you. So I want to give you some tools that we can use to build our boys into good men. So what I want to do is just share with you very quickly some gifts that we can give our boys. Again, it doesn't matter if you're raising boys or not. We all have boys in our world. And these are some things that we can do for our boys. So the first tool that we can use to build boys into men is masculine energy. And what I mean by masculine energy is that boys need men to become men. It takes a man to build a boy into a man. And what our boys need, in particular in the 21st century, are good men to surround them, to help them harness this masculine energy and use it for good and noble purposes. To be able to look boys in their eyes, whether it's our sons or our grandsons or just the guys in your church, the boys in your church, and say, follow me as I follow Jesus into manhood. Boys are being raised primarily in their early years in a feminine world. Nothing wrong with that. Again, mainly by moms and by female teachers, female Sunday school teachers. Nothing wrong with that. That will help them become good men, but they need masculine energy as well. They need men to surround them and say, this is what a good man looks like. Boys need you to help them do that. Second thing boys need is affirmation. They particularly need their dads to say to them, I'm proud of you. And if they don't have a dad to say that, they just need men to say it to them. I'm proud of you. You're really good at this. Even Jesus needed to hear that, right, before he went on his mission and ministry. And if guys don't have a man to say, I'm proud of you, they will look for it elsewhere. They will look for that validation elsewhere, and usually in the wrong places. Or they will live with a hole in their heart for the rest of their lives. And my dad was one of those guys. His dad was an alcoholic, and my dad lived with a father wound all of his life and spent his entire life trying to prove to his dad, who had passed away a long time ago, Dad, I'm worthy of your praise. And our boys need to know that. They need to know that Dad is proud of them. They need to know that you're proud of them. So if you catch guys and boys in your church walking around, just put your arm around them and say, I'm proud of you. And let them feel that masculine energy. And then the last one is our boys need a challenge. Our boys are being told today that they're toxic. Our boys are being told today that they're predators. They're not that at all. They are called to be good men. And King David brought his son in right before he died, and he said to Solomon, show yourself to be a man. And he wasn't saying climb the corporate ladder. He wasn't saying dominate women. He wasn't saying be a jerk. He was saying show the world God's character in the way that you live. But what Solomon didn't have that he needed along with that challenge was men around him to live out that vision. So our boys are struggling in the 21st century. And we are called as men, as dads, as grandpas, as uncles, as men in the church, we are called to mentor these boys, to bless them with God's affirmation, and to give them the challenge that they're called to be good men, and then to surround them with our energy to help them become those good men. I do have a book available myself. I've written for churches to help you stop the exodus of boys from your church. Those are available over there. Would love to chat with you after the program today. Thank you very, very much.